Good. Hi, good afternoon. Um, Thank you so much for attending today's CFE community chat. Um, for those of you newer to CFE, I'm Sarah Hoppy Knight. I'm the co-executive director of the organization. We are a Chicago-based education nonprofit. We've been around for 37 years. Supporting and funding CPS educators so they can best serve their students and grow in their profession. We've been awarding grants and fellowships and offering professional growth opportunities to CPS pre-K through 12th grade educators consistently over that almost 4-decade period. So the CFE Community Chat Initiative, this series is fairly new to us. Considering we have been around for 37 years. We kicked it off last April, sort of in the throes of the pandemic, and we have hosted now more than 20 of these sessions since we kicked it off last spring. So it's really great. It's been well received and we're just really, really proud of it. So anyway, we know how exhausted you are, like especially at the end of a normal school year and certainly at the end of this one. And with all the added challenges and emotional turmoil, we're just so grateful that you chose to spend some time with us today. And Katie and Michaela and my Kayla. So a few quick notes before we get started. If you have any questions during today's presentation, you're welcome to pop them in the chat box. Our session today will likely be pretty small, and so fairly informal. But if you do have questions, you want to raise your hand, that's fine. If you'd like to pop them in the chat box, the questions will be monitored and addressed throughout the presentation. So that's fine to do that. The session is also going to be recorded and it'll be posted along with the slide deck and any associated resources on our website's resource roundup section by the end of the week. And then finally, just keep an eye out in the chat box for other helpful information and messages from Kayla, who's my program associate at CFE. So let's get into it. Our presenter today is Katie Hollerbach. She's taught social science at Lindblom Math and Science Academy for the past 10 years and is currently teaching global civics, ethnic and gender studies, and introduction to secondary education. She's also the coordinator for the Lindblom Teacher Apprentice program, providing high school students with the opportunity to learn and teach as TAs in a middle or high school classroom setting. Outside of her work in CPS, Katie's a teaching coach in Northwestern's MS Ed program and enjoys working with pre-service teachers to develop their own teaching philosophies and action research projects. This interest was reflected in her first project for CFE's ARLI program, which is our Action Research Fellowship, which examined the impact of Lindblom's Teacher Apprentice program on high school students' growth, as well as their understanding of and interest in the teaching profession. This year, as a senior fellow with ARLI, Katie's research focuses on the impact of centering stories of joy, resistance, and collective action in her high school social science classes. So Katie is joined today by one of her students, Michaela, which is wonderful. Katie will introduce her a little bit more, but Michaela, is a participant in the Lindblom Teacher Apprentice program as a senior at Lindblom. So Katie, the floor is yours.
Okay, great. Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Just going to go ahead and share my screen real quick before I introduce Michaela. Okay. Is that correct? Can you all tell me, am I sharing it correctly? Okay. Okay, great. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for being here. I'd like to introduce Michaela Johnson, who is, as Sarah mentioned, a senior at Lindblom and will be attending Tuskegee University in the fall on a full ride scholarship. Woo, woo, woo. And she has been in the LTA program for 2 years now, working in an English 1 classroom. Go ahead and say hi, Michaela.
Hi, everyone.
So because the focus of this presentation is about student voice and leadership, it just felt appropriate to have a student presenting alongside me. And Michaela has been just a wonderful participant in the program and also has helped me a ton in terms of my teaching practice. This is my 3rd year teaching Michaela, so we've spent quite a bit of time together. I'm going to put in the chat a link to preview mode of the slides. I've embedded some links so that I might reference a few things if you might want to click and get a little bit more info. And as Sarah mentioned, we're kind of a small group, so feel free to ask any questions in the chat, and hopefully this can be a discussion as much as a presentation. So with that, I guess I would invite you all, if you'd like to introduce yourselves in the chat, just so we can kind of get a sense of who's here. So if you are currently working in an education space or working with young people in any capacity, I invite you to share the school that you work at or the organization that you work with. That might just help us in terms of brainstorming some ideas around how we can create more space for student voice and student leadership. Okay, great. So yeah. And there's another thing that I'm going to invite you to share in the chat as well, along with your introductions. I thought it might be helpful for us to think a little bit about where we currently are in terms of opportunities for student voice and leadership in our schools and classrooms. And so this might be specific to your context. And then based on that, what we might imagine and where we might want to be and what do we need to make that happen. Oh, great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your introductions in the chat. Hi, Allie. Yay. So at Lindblom, we use a 1 through 4 scale. We use standards-based grading. And so this is just kind of how my brain thinks. But for those of you who are working in spaces with young people, I'm curious on a scale from 1 to 4, and you can add this in the chat or come off mute, whichever you prefer. Where would you say you are currently at in terms of opportunities for student voice and leadership? Is this something that, maybe not yet, there aren't that many opportunities for this either in your classroom or your school? Is this something that maybe exists in your classroom, but it's not yet school-wide? That would maybe be like a 2. A 3 would be students have access to a variety of student leadership opportunities. And a 4 would be not only do these opportunities exist, but there's equity and representation for all students in these positions. So I'm curious to know if I invite you all to put in the chat if you'd like to share kind of where you feel like you're at in terms of this scale here. Hi, Marins. Hi, Molly. Okay, great. See a 2, a 3. And I'll just share, I would say, I think for myself, maybe between like a 3 and a 4, I think that something that the research that I'm going to talk about today helped me see with some opportunities for how we might create better representation in terms of the LTA program. So just making sure that the students that are in those roles are kind of reflective of the student body. So something that we're continuing to kind of work on. Okay. So glad to see the 2s and the 3s. I hope that we can share some ideas, and I look forward to learning from you all as well. So our goal then, or something that I'd like to do with you all today, is to think about this moment that we're in. In many ways, this has been the most challenging school year I have ever had in my teaching career. But I really liked the community chat last week, and I encourage you all to check out the resource page, the CFE resource page. The topic was Ready to Reimagine, and it was a really wonderful discussion about how we can reimagine our classrooms and our schools for next year. I know this is kind of the point in the year when thinking ahead to next year feels a little bit more invigorating than thinking about the current moment as motivation is starting to dwindle. So for this chat, though, I really like this idea of thinking about like, well, what can be different for next year? And even if this is, student voice and leadership is not something that's embedded in your classroom or your school, how might we work to kind of create that for next year? So with that, yes, really great. Highly recommend. I really appreciated participating in that. these are our goals for today. I love any opportunity to share a bit about this amazing program that Molly created. So I'll share a little bit about the program itself. And I'm also going to be talking about some research that I did last year on the program. And how those findings are not only relevant to a program like this one, but also just to any teacher, anyone who's in an education space. We're going to be hearing quite a bit from Michaela about her experience in the program and how it's impacted her. And then we'll end by engaging in discussion about what next year might look like, how we can reimagine it to include more opportunities for student voice and student leadership. So these are my objectives for us today. So to start, let me tell you about this wonderful program. Shout out to Molly, who is in attendance today. Holly Meyer started this program in 2013, and the vision was inspired by Science Leadership Academy in, oh dear, Molly, it's in Philadelphia. Is that correct? Not Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. Right. Yeah, okay, cool. Hi. And so what this program does is it pairs 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students with a class and a mentor teacher for the year. So it's kind of like student teaching, but with high school students. And they are TAs in 7th through 12th grade classrooms in all of the departments that are listed here. And it started off pretty small. There were 9 LTAs in the first cohort. In this current year, we had 148. And now we're at the point where we are at Lindblom interviewing former TAs for open teaching positions that we have, which is kind of exciting. So it's really grown a lot over the last 8 or so years. And so to give you a sense of what this is like, the pictures here show Ashley and Trinity are the 2 students who are standing. They were TAs in this 7th grade math classroom. And they're observing their mentor teach a lesson, solving a math problem. Then after she finished and the mentor was going and helping other students, we see in this bottom picture here, Ashley doing this kind of pro like teacher lean as she supports a student. So the word apprentice is kind of bolded in yellow here because Molly really purposely chose this. She imagined this as like the students would be teaching alongside us and would be just engaging in every aspect of teaching and like doing all the things that we do on the day-to-day. So really integral parts of the class. And to give you a sense of the many responsibilities of that and what it might look like, I'm going to invite Michaela to share a little bit. So Michaela is a TA in an English 1 classroom. So Michaela, would you like to share, this list here might look familiar, we've kind of worked on this together, but what are some of the things that you do in your, as a TA in your class? What does the work look like to you?
So with this being my second year, I do like a little bit more in my second year. So for one, I do community builder. So like at the beginning of class, I'll have like a community builder for the class to do. And that's just for the students to get to know each other and to bond with each other. And I also provide in-class examples of like paragraphs or answers to like analysis questions because I am an English LTA. So I just provide in-class examples for anybody who needs help or any guidance on the assignment. I also join breakout groups just to like guide conversations because sometimes students can be shy, especially virtually. Now that we're virtual, so I go in discussion groups and I just guide the conversations. And I plan out activities and lessons, which has been something that I really enjoy. Like this year, I did a creative writing assignment with the class. So they took on the perspective of another character in the novel that we were reading. So that's basically like an overview of the things that I do in my class.
That is so great. Michaela, how many lessons would you say that you've taught?
About 2 or 3, and it's about to be number 4 in like a week.
Oh, let me know. I want to come watch. That sounds great. So as Michaela mentioned, these are some of the many ways that she's involved in the class. I think it can kind of vary also by the content that's being taught, but they're really involved in a variety of different ways. I know your mentor really appreciates your feedback to Michaela, so it's also a nice way for teachers to kind of get a student's perspective on what might be going on in the classroom. So if this is what it looks like in the at like the classroom level, it was also really important when Molly created this program that not just, you know, within the individual classrooms that they're in, but just the program as a whole should center student voice and leadership within. So honestly, this program could not run without the TAs themselves, not only because, you know, they're the ones doing the work, but they also help with, from beginning to end, the recruitment and application process. So the Jamboard that you see here, Michaela, this was from our info session that we did recruiting this spring for next year's TAs. So 4 current TAs led the session. The students who attended, who were interested in applying, asked questions, and then Michaela and her peers answered the questions while I typed notes in the pink Post-its. So they help with recruitment. They conduct all the interviews of next year's TAs also. So the picture here is from last year's interviews. This year's were virtual. They also help me write the interview questions by coming up with scenarios. And they run orientations and support sessions throughout the year. So anytime that I have a question about, you know, how something should go, you know, how might I change the reflections that we do, or what type of supports are needed, I go to the TAs themselves, and they kind of have a lot of voice and say in the process. So that was part of the mission from the very beginning. And so I'm proud that we've been able to kind of continue that, you know, centrality of student voice. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the unexpected findings that I had from my research project last year. I was looking for something totally different than what I'm going to be talking to you all today about. But at like a year later, I've kind of seen how the work that I did last year actually has a lot of really relevant lessons to people in all types of educational spaces. And so that's what I want to share with you all today. But just for context, this was the question that I was looking at last year. I believe this is one of the slides. If you are in preview mode, the link in the chat, if you click on the Arlie research question, it'll take you to my executive summary. Last year, I was interested in studying the program and how different support interventions that I tried might help students develop ownership over their teaching. And like, I really wondered, like, is this getting more students to go into the teaching profession? I was a little bit disappointed when I discovered kind of it was the answer to that question. So there were definitely some students who had this experience and then were more interested in teaching as a profession. But then there were a lot of students like Michaela, who has a different career in mind. Michaela is going to be majoring in social work. I think that's correct, Michaela, right? But education minor, I've tried very hard. Okay, got the minor in there. But despite the fact that that's maybe not going to be her career, she's gotten a lot of other benefits from being a TA in the program. So that's the part that I kind of want to talk to you all about today. So kind of turning some of my last year disappointments into a positive. So the first finding that I think is can be applied to other spaces as well, even schools that don't have a TA program, is that this program, or I would say any leadership opportunity, comes with a variety of student motivations and also a variety of outcomes. So one thing that I looked at last year was I coded their applications to see why students were applying, just to get a sense of what they were looking for to get out of the experience. And last year, to my disappointment, only 22 of the 160 expressed any interest in teaching as a profession. And although that was kind of, you know, hard for me at the time, now I see that there's some really other like wonderful things that students were looking to get out of this. Most commonly, they just talked about like wanting to help other students. A lot of them talked about like, this is an opportunity for personal growth. I want to work on my speaking. I want to become more of a leader. And so now I see how like that variety of motivations is actually a really cool thing. And with such a big program, it was clear that students were getting out of it a lot more than even just this kind of exposure to the craft of teaching. So Michaela, I'm curious, do you remember what I wonder now how I coded your application. Do you remember what motivated you to apply? Why did you decide to apply to be a TA?
I think I chose 2 options. I said desire to help others, and I was inspired by a current LTA. So my first year at Lynn Bloom, I was in English 1 class, and I had an LTA in that class, and she was amazing with like helping us with everything that we needed, and she was always there for us if we needed anything. So I was like really like I want to be her. Like I feel like I can do what she's doing with us now because I like helping and I like English. So I'm like I feel like I can do that too. And then that's when I applied my junior year.
Amazing. Was that Chai?
No, I think her name was Jamia.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she was my English 1 LTA.
Oh, that is so nice. Okay, great. And I love too, I think that that was something that I wasn't expecting, that I've kind of continued to see, is this idea that, you know, students can like see themselves in that leadership position when they have TAs in the classroom with them. And then in terms of like the things that students get out of it, even, you know, they might go in with certain motivations or goals. I also saw through my research last year that there was just a lot that students gained in addition to just exposure to the profession. So this student was also in the program for 2 years and talked about how it's more than people would expect, and how it helped them with their pre-calc class and then also public speaking skills. So this was kind of an unexpected outcome last year that I discovered, and it has continued to be true this year. I was a little bit nervous having this program with remote learning in a pandemic. I didn't know how it would go, but it turns out it was still a pretty meaningful experience for students. So I asked on a reflection in January what was the most meaningful part of their TA experience so far this year, and these are some of the things that they've said. And I love this comment on the bottom. Being able to help in any way has been the best thing ever. So kind of continuing to see that idea of, being able to be in that leadership role, being able to be in an educator's shoes and helping others continues to be an outcome. Michaela, I wonder what has been your favorite memory or most meaningful part this year, because you were a TA in person and now also remotely. I don't know, what would you say is your favorite part this year?
I would say I kind of have two. So with me being an English 1 LTA, they're all freshmen, and these are freshmen that came from like middle school, and this is their first year in high school, and it's virtual. So I know that can be kind of hard for them adjusting to the high school setting. So I was just glad that I was able to make them comfortable coming into the high school setting. It's like their first year. I was able to be like a role model for them, and like help them along the way. So it'll make like the classes easier. And I build like great bonds with all my students. Like I talk to them about, of course, the work inside the class, but I get to know them on like a basis outside of school as well. So once I learn those things about them, that's when we can have like those deeper conversations. And a couple of my students are on sports at my school, and I saw a couple of them at a football game, and it was just great to have them like excited to see me because like I know I'm making that impact, like I'm helping them as much as I can in the classroom. So it was just great to see them in person as well.
That is so awesome. They are so lucky. Someone else said this in the chat too, but I agree. They're so lucky. Okay, great. Thanks, Michaela. So another finding from last year that I'm excited to share with you all, I went into this research, and actually, Michaela, I don't know if you remember me talking about this research last year, but I went in trying to discover like what was the thing that I could do that would help support students and help them grow as teachers and help them, learn more about teaching and learning. And I also teach an education class that Michaela was a part of last year. So this is like a smaller subset of TAs who might be a little bit more interested in learning about pedagogy and education policy and that sort of thing. So I was looking at that group in particular, and I was just trying to figure out like, what is it that I can model for them or share with them or teach them? And the biggest finding that I had was I just needed to step back. It wasn't something that I needed to do other than create space and get out of their way. And this was a finding that was supported by student reflections, by mentor teacher, I wrote about this in my own teacher journal. So this was kind of universally true. And this is something that I think has really stuck with me this year too, when trying to navigate this very strange, challenging year. I have found that just referring to this as like, I just need to give them space, and I just need to kind of like step back a little bit. And that's been really powerful. I'll give some examples of that in just a minute. So I guess like what I mean by this is it wasn't like, you know, teaching them about growth mindset or reading an excerpt from, you know, Eve Ewing's book, which was also great. But it was just giving opportunities for them to plan and teach and kind of experience it for themselves. So this here is a student's reflection talking about how their confidence grew after teaching. And then when I asked students to rate different activities that we did in class at the end of the year, there were 4 of like the 10 that I gave them that were rated either very useful or essential. And the only one that all students rated as essential was designing an assessment and teaching a lesson. So this really impacted how I teach the class this year. They teach even more now, Michaela, if you can believe it. They taught and planned, I think, 3 lessons. And it's also something that I've applied to some of my other social science classes as well, which I'll speak about in just a minute. So again, this was confirmed by mentors as well. I asked, what helped them grow? Was it the peer observations that we did? Was it the reflections? And turns out it was not so much the things that I had created or done, which I think were still helpful, but it was just the space that we were able to create for students to kind of, you know, do the teaching and do the leading on their own. So this kind of reflecting on this has led me to this question, which I kind of like took into this this year with me. How can we create more space for our students to grow, to teach, and to lead? And so this is the question that I'd like to kind of come back to at the end, also to see what ideas you all have and how we can kind of brainstorm together. But before we do that, and before I talk about how I've kind of applied these things to my teaching this year, I want to pause for a quick moment and just see if anyone has any questions for either me or Michaela just about the LTA program overall.
I have a question. First of all, this has been incredible. Thank you both so much. I'm just so many notes, and I'm blown away. And gosh, especially by you, Michaela. I was wondering if you could speak to something you're feeling. Something you felt like especially proud of in terms of like you got to take the space, like an experience you had where you really felt like you got to take the space you deserve to take.
I think it'll be like more of an experience this year because we were virtual. I kind of felt like the teacher had to take over because they were new students, but I knew like I was good at what I was doing. So like I took over a lesson. Like I was talking about the creative writing assignment that I did. I kind of took over that lesson and kind of made it my own and let the students know like I can be like in that teacher role too. So when I was creating the lesson and like going by like what I want them to get out of it, I was like, I'm really in my moment. Like I think I can do this. And as I was creating the lesson, I just knew that they were going to be really engaged in it. And once I brought it to the class and how like I saw them engaged, how they were like coming to me, wanting me to read their creative writing assignments and just how interactive they were with me, I knew that like I was in my moment and I like deserved to be a teacher at that point.
Amazing question, Marins. Thank you. And great.
This is a totally, in so many ways, a much different, better, more expansive, amazing program than the thing I started. So this is so awesome. I have a question about, you know, as we make space for students to grow, teach, and lead, like the role of making space for like mistakes or like messiness, and like the teachers, I feel like there's like an urge on teachers' part to that's a failure, you know, in some ways as a teacher, like you feel like you failed if the students messed up or didn't, you know, and the space. Yeah, what have you found in terms of the space to be messy or make mistakes?
Michaela, I wonder, I have a response, so I'll give you a minute to think, Michaela, but if you have an example of a time where you feel like you maybe like messed up a little bit, as teachers do, as, you know, my lesson yesterday, for example. So if you have any examples, Michaela, feel free to chime in, but thank you, Molly, for this thoughtful question. I do think that that is probably the biggest, one of the biggest things that I learned last year is I think that I thought that, I was like, I can't put my TA in this position to teach until I prepare them or I do this or that. And I realized that I was almost getting in their way by thinking that way. And I like underestimating them, like not intentionally, but and so I realized this year I've just kind of like stepped back a little bit more, and my TA has taught more this year than I have kind of made space for in the past. And I think that there's been times where, she has said like, this could have gone differently or better or whatever. But then there's been a lot more times that she's been like, oh, that was really great, and she's taught like whole classes by herself. So I guess, for me, I needed to see, so the pictures of the classroom that I had before, I needed to see what that looked like. And like, that reflected back to me was like, oh, I'm getting in the way. So seeing the space that another teacher was creating for her TAs really made me reflect on like how I might need to be stepping back a little bit more. But I think that's a really important question, Molly. Thank you. Michaela, do you have any examples of times where you feel like you taught something or did something and it, wasn't, you're really hard on yourself. You're kind of critical. So I don't know, but I think that you're also an amazing teacher. But do you have any examples to share, Michaela?
I do. It was my first year as an LT, and it was like my first big lesson that I was teaching to the class. And like when I was at home prepping for it, I was ready, but when I got in front of the class, it was like I underestimated how much I knew and like what I wanted to teach. So it's kind of like I froze a bit while I was up there, but it was like as the class went on, I kind of got comfortable teaching the lesson, but going into it, I kind of was underestimating like if I could do it. Like I was like being hard on myself, like I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if they're going to be engaged enough in the lesson. I don't know like what I'm going to do if like they don't like really like reciprocate the energy that I'm trying to give. So like I was just really hard on myself. But I think like once I gave myself that chance to like breathe and like know that you can do it, I think the lesson went perfectly fine after that.
Are you kinder to yourself now, Michaela?
Definitely. The students that I have, they're like really like the energy that they bring to the class is just really amazing. So like I make them comfortable, they make me comfortable. So anytime like I'm teaching a lesson, I know like there's gonna be like some dialogue back and forth with each other. Like at first when we were virtual, I thought like it was gonna be cameras off, nobody's gonna talk to me, and I'm just gonna be talking to screens. But I definitely get the conversation back and forth from my students.
That's so great. All right, everyone. Any more questions before I share just a few more things that we can end with a little more discussion? Thank you for the opportunity to work on my wait time. Okay, great. So I want to share just a few examples of, I'm going to end with like trying to, encourage everyone here to start a program like this because it's so wonderful, and Michaela will kind of have the last word there. But I also want to share some examples of this question here and what this has looked like for me, at least in terms of ideas at the classroom level and at the school level, in terms of how we can create more space for student leadership. So teachers on the call can relate. This was a very humbling year, I'll say. And I feel like I just had sometimes like no idea how to plan a lesson or what was going to be engaging for students, or I don't know. I needed a lot of help this year. And so one way that I think that I've applied what I learned last year just to myself as a teacher, even I only have one class that has a TA. So even in my classes where I don't have a TA, is I really realized the value of seeking out and incorporating student feedback, because I saw last year, like, wow, like these young people, these students are fantastic teachers and they have great ideas about teaching and learning. So I feel like I've really kind of leaned into that. And so I was starting to plan for my ethnic and gender studies class, which started in February. So predominantly second semester seniors in remote learning, which has been very enjoyable, but also a bit of a challenge at times. And so I just felt like I needed all the help I could get in planning this. And so Michaela, I don't know if you remember this, I sent you an email and I think I had like 4 questions. I was like, okay, I need help with this. Like, do you have any ideas for this? Should we do tea time? And so one example of like how that has, I think, made the class better, one of many examples, was a community builder that I had heard her talk about in LTA collaboration that I was like, ooh, that's good. We need to do that. And so I asked if she could kind of share that and lead that with the class. So Michaela, do you want to talk a little bit about what is song significance? What does it look like in your TA class? And then how do you think it's gone, or how we stopped doing it, I guess, but how did it go in ethnic and gender studies?
So for the first couple of weeks when I was first beginning my class, they had already gave me like that they like music. So I was like, what's the way that I can incorporate music in the class to get them more engaged? So the first thing I thought about was song significance. So I made a Google form and they were to put their name and like a list of their favorite songs. They can put however many they wanted to. And they would create a slide for one of the songs that they had. So like at the beginning, they would create one slide. It'll have like the artist, the name of the song, and why is it significant to them. And that was a way for their peers to get to know them, but also for me and the mentor teacher to get to know them as well. And we play the songs at the beginning of each class just to get the class like in a positive, going in like a positive direction, and also to get the class engaged. And now that we've moved on like towards the end of the school year, I still play the songs. They don't use the slides anymore, but I still play like a song at the beginning of every class just to get the class up and moving. And now we do it like every other day because we have another community builder that like I implemented into the class, which are the virtual lockers. So since they can't be in school to decorate their lockers, we did virtual lockers and they just put their favorite things on the locker and they present those to the class as well. So we've been getting to know each other from like the beginning to the end. And in terms of ethnic and gender studies, I know music is something that I personally enjoy, and I know like my peers enjoy it as well. So since we're all like juniors and seniors in that class, I knew it would be something that would work. So Ms. Hollerbach asked me, I was like, I thought it'd be a great idea, and I think it's still something that the class enjoys now. We do songs, and then she plays like songs when we have work time, so I think it's working well.
I've also learned some new artists. I feel like I've become a little bit cooler. So thank you for that, Michaela. So I think that like what a great example, right? Like what a great idea. So I have kind of very selfishly stolen a lot of Michaela, or borrowed a lot of Michaela's ideas along with some other TAs. And I think that this is also something that, you know, in a year where we feel very vulnerable as teachers, every day feels a little bit like it didn't go how we wanted. I think at the beginning of the year, I was nervous to seek out student feedback a lot because I expected like, oh, if I ask how things went, then I think I'll be afraid of the answer. I remember sending the first feedback form after week 1 and then just like closed my Google Drive and like didn't want to look at it. But I think my research last year and the TA program showed me that like they have really great ideas and I need to do the opposite of like feeling vulnerable and shying away from feedback because it's led to some really great ideas. And as we can see, this is from one of the responses from these Google Forms that I've given about every 2 weeks, maybe every 2 to 3. In a typical year, I would have asked for feedback maybe once a quarter. But now I realize that like these students have amazing ideas. And for this student, Dee said that they feel, or that they appreciate that I let them take the lead and that is like a good feeling. So I definitely think that seeking out student feedback has made all of my classes stronger this year. And some other examples of that I can, oh, great. Oh, great, Marins, I'm gonna ask you to invite you to share in a minute if you would like. But some other examples of how we can seek out and incorporate student feedback in addition to these like Google Forms, or if you don't have a Michaela to email and ask for ideas, my colleague Kayla, shout out to her, does for the first, I think like almost every day, the first 2 weeks of class, she does a gots and needs form. So what is something that you got from class today? What is something that you still need? So if you click on that in the presentation view of the slides, it'll make a copy of that form for you. And I also want to give a shout out to my colleague, Alyssa, who's doing some really awesome work in her Arlie Fellowship, which I'm a part of for the second year this year. And she is looking at co-generative dialogues where she meets with a group of 5 or 6 students every week to do exactly what I just explained with Michaela here. So just to get feedback on class, to get ideas for how class is going. It's really, really awesome. So if you click here in the slides, it'll take you to the registration page to come see those presentations, which are coming up in early June. So shout out to Alyssa for that awesome work. Marins, would you like to share with us what is the idea that you had mentioned in terms of an activity that you're doing in class?
Absolutely. So perfectly, we're working on music and poetry right now. I teach 8th graders at Northwest Middle School in ELA in an emergent bilingual classroom, and they're incredible. But we're working on music, and I gave out a form and asked students to share a favorite song and then why that song resonates, and put together a playlist. But I definitely didn't think to give students the agency to create their own slide. Like, I think that is such a powerful teacher move. Like, as they say, just to give some agency and say, like, you get to pick what this looks like and feels like, is my understanding. Yeah, I like that, Michaela, that's amazing. I say to students all the time, like, I learn from you just as much as you learn from me, and I'm learning a lot from you, so much. So thank you for that. I'm excited to think about offering them the chance to put together a slideshow. That's awesome.
Love that. Okay, great. So another classroom strategy that I think kind of incorporates some of the things that I learned last year through my research is this idea that, you know, they grew the most when they were able to lead and teach. And so I was like, how can I apply that to my social science classes? Obviously in my education class, that kind of fits. I make space for them to plan and teach lessons, but I feel like I've made a more purposeful effort to create those spaces in my 10th grade global civics class and also in ethnic and gender studies. So for example, asking students to lead community builders, asking students to do current events presentations, to do a speech on a topic that they care about. Michaela, I don't know if you remember the Tell Your Story projects. We had like an open mic and they created a piece that was, that reflected some aspect of their identity. And actually, Michaela, I'm going to ask you, as a student of mine for the last 3 years, these are like some examples that I can think of. I'm wondering too, I don't know, are any of these activities standing out to you as like something that you particularly enjoyed? And what other examples can you share from other classes that you've been in where you feel like you've had space to like use your voice, if that makes sense?
Well, this year in our ethnic and gender studies class, I think the Tell Your Story project kind of stuck out to me the most because like I was able to like tell my story, and it was just something that I don't really talk about. So it was just great to like get it off my chest kind of. So like I really liked that project. And in other classes that I've been in, we do like kind of do like free writes in a way. So like you're able to like write in whatever form you want, and it can be formal, informal, it can be poetry, it can be anything you want. And I think just having the space to like anything you have on your mind to get off your chest into writing, I think that's just a great way for students to like speak out and use their voices. And then you can always allow students to share out if they want to, but it's just an opportunity for students to get like something off their mind that could be like weighing heavy on them or something that makes them happy. So that's just something that I've done in other classes as well that I think work for me.
Awesome. What other opportunities can we imagine, or are there other examples that anyone can share that they've tried in their classes? You know, space for students to teach or speak out or share.
I had like what I thought was going to be kind of an end of the year throwaway idea of like what am I going to do after the AP exam kind of thing, and it was a TED Talk. The students did a TED Talk on a topic that they cared a lot about that had to do with human geography, which is essentially everything has to do with human geography. So, and we did a lot of stuff that year, and 4 years later, 8 years later, that's the one that students cared about the most, because it was an opportunity to, practice public speaking, but also talk about something they cared about that directly related to their own lives. And it really changed the way I thought about my classes from that point on.
I'm also thinking about the monologue project, Molly. Yes. In women's studies. Yeah, very cool. And I think like these examples are also making me think about Michaela, the Tell Your Story projects were not graded. Those were not for a grade, yet that is the thing that the most students have turned in. Have I shared this with you? There are graded assignments that other students just have not done. And so I think that is a lesson to me also, that like sometimes I'll be afraid to try something. I'm like, well, if it's not for a grade, like will students be motivated to do it? The answer is yes. Like if it's meaningful, they will be motivated to do it. But I think, yeah, and like what our goal should be to create space for the thing that they're going to remember, 4 years later, as Molly's example shows. Great, Marins, go ahead. I knew you would have some examples.
Oh, thank you. So similarly, but I'm really still fleshing it out this year on Fridays, so students can sign up to present on a topic that they're passionate about, and it's week to week. So if something comes up in that week, students are then able to fill out the survey and say like, I really want to present and talk about those things. And I have them fill it out earlier in the week so that if they need any resources or anything like that, but like they're incredible and don't need my help. So that's really, really powerful. And then within the context of that, especially as the year has gone on, students have been generous in sharing their truths and their stories. And so there's lots of opportunity for like egress as well, right? If a student, like if a topic is not going to keep that student safe in that day, in that moment, like there's always opportunities for students to use Google Draw and meditate. They have self-care toolboxes. So there's that piece, and those have been incredible and so passionate. And one of the things that I've seen come out of that, so like, for instance, we had a female identifying student present on sexism that she has experienced playing sports, and several male identifying students spoke up and said like how unjust that was and how upset they were. And it just lends itself to really just incredible support and connection that they just are willing to offer each other. The other piece, I had them write me letters, and then another ungraded assignment that was turned in the most. I got a letter from every single student, and they were incredible. And so then what I did then was have students sign up to like write a letter to the class. So we've rotated every week where one student writes like a paragraph to the class, and they can say whatever they would like. So that's okay. Those are the ideas, and I have more from this presentation. So thank you.
Michaela, I've been trying to think of how we're going to end our time in ethic and gender. Okay, well, you and I will chat. Maybe we could use Marin's idea and do something, because I feel like y'all are such a lovely group. Okay, great. Thanks so much for those ideas, everyone. So just two more points that I want to make here, and then any other ideas in terms of school-wide stuff. And actually, for student voice, there's some people on this call who can speak to this more than I can. But I think that, if we're trying to think about where we fall from that scale from 1 to 4 in terms of student voice and leadership, does it exist in our classroom or does it exist school-wide? Student Voice Committee is one amazing opportunity for students to come together and discuss issues that might be that they're passionate about, and to discuss potential solutions. Molly, you can speak to this better than I can. Marins, you might have a student voice. You might be involved in Student Voice Committee. Am I making that up? That's correct. Okay. If you click on the what is Student Voice Committee, it'll take you to that one pager from CPS. And I guess one other example that I'll give that, again, like how the project from last year kind of stayed with me is when we were this summer kind of frantically like, how are we going to do remote learning? What should this look like in the spring, and what worked? And I was sitting in a meeting with teachers and they were like, well, I think like students enjoyed this or that or whatever. And I was like, what are we basing this on? Like, what is this based on, like our own perception? Like, did we ask these students? And so I created a remote learning survey and gave it to the TAs to ask their feedback. And it was actually a little bit different than we thought in terms of things that they enjoyed and things that they wanted more of or less of. So I think now I'm much more likely to like really make sure that we're including students as decision makers in the, as we're setting policies and that sort of thing. Because the useful information that I've learned through that. Any thoughts on Student Voice Committee or any other ideas for kind of school-wide strategies for student feedback and student voice?
I'm happy to, two things that the Student Voice Committee did when I was at Lindblom. They gave feedback on the grading system and particularly around ways that they thought that it could be improved, which I really appreciated. And I think teachers make assumptions about like what students think about grading, and they want to be challenged. They want to be held to a high standard, but they want it to be fair and transparent. And so that was a big one. And then students created the schedule for one of our days of the week. They created the whole schedule for that day. So these aren't small, these weren't small at all. At another school for Student Voice Committee, they brought in Aramark to taste the food live with them, the people from Aramark, and to show them like that the food wasn't very good and wasn't, very healthy or well prepared, and had like leaders from Chicago Public Schools plus Aramark there to kind of have the taste test live. And so it was very cool ways for students to have really big impacts on both sort of school policies that I thought was really profound.
Speaking of students having impact on school policies, Michaela, do you want to speak a little bit about your policy fellowship that you're doing this year?
Yes, so I'm in the Student Advisory Council for Illinois. So basically, we have kids from like all over the city of Chicago and like schools from all around the world, and we all come together and we give them like feedback because they're a program that like gives like grants and things like that to different schools. So we've been giving them like feedback on things that we feel like need to be fixed inside of schools, just to make it a better environment for all students, and then the students that are coming after us as well. So me being a senior, I kind of like have been through like the high school experience and the elementary school experience. Like I kind of know like some things that I wanted to be changed. So like I just give my idea on like sex ed class that I feel like need to be changed, or I brought up the LTA program that I felt like other schools could adopt as well. So it's just like I give like my opinion on what I feel needs to be changed, and they give us resources that we can share with our schools just to help other students. I recently just shared a PACE checklist that they gave me in our meeting last week, and it's basically a checklist from grades 8th through 12th grade, and it gives them like a checklist of things that they can be doing in that year to help them better prepare for life after high school. So for 8th graders, it has them like writing down a list of high schools they feel like they want to go to and like what they're interested in, all the way up to 12th grade where you should be doing FAFSA and applying to colleges. So I feel like that program has allowed me to bring my opinion in, but it's also gave me resources to share with other people as well.
I saw that you posted that on the LTA page, Michaela. Is it okay if I share that with my 10th graders too? My 10th grade students?
Yes.
That was so cool. Yeah, what a fantastic opportunity. And Michaela, how many, there's like 15 or 16 across the whole state that you're one of?
Yes, I think it's 15 of us.
Amazing. And I wonder, I could be speculating here, but I wonder if you would have pursued that opportunity had you not been in the TA program, and or like how is your experience as a TA, maybe like back to a point you made before, given you a bit more confidence and a bit more, I don't know, do you see a connection between those two things?
I definitely do. I think being an LTA and kind of being in like the teacher's position and looking at it and knowing it from like a teacher's perspective and the student's perspective, when I went into the council, I kind of took both experiences with me to help them guide like what programs they should implement and what classes that I feel like need to be better. So just me having the mindset of a teacher and having the mindset of a student helped me when I went into the council. So definitely being an LTA has helped me like build my voice up to be able to talk about those things, because before I don't know if I probably would have signed up, but I don't know like how beneficial I would have been, because like sometimes I could be a tad bit shy. So I just think the LTA program kind of has built my voice up a bit, and it allowed me to share those things with them. So that's good.
Ah, amazing. Well, I wanted you to have the last word here too, Michaela. For the final project last year in our education class, students had to propose a policy. There were a lot of proposals for changes to the senior year schedule so that seniors had to take less classes. You know, there were a few different things going on. But Michaela's project was on why schools should create more an LTA program. I pulled this quote from your project. I went back to Google Classroom, Michaela. So I thought this would be a powerful way to end. Molly and I have actually presented on this exact topic before as well. And so I guess we'll end here. And Michaela, any final thoughts from you about why you think this is a program that should exist elsewhere as well?
So for me, I think the LTA program should be something that's adopted by other schools, because, okay, I wrote notes for this one. I feel like it should be adopted because it helps build leadership skills and public speaking skills. Because I know, like, from like being a freshman, you can be kind of quiet and you're in a new space. So I feel like the LTA program kind of built my voice up to be able to talk about the things that I'm passionate about. And it allows for older students to act as role models for the younger students, because sometimes they could be lost in a new environment. So I feel like having that guide of like someone that's older than you but in the same school as you just makes the environment and the situation that they're in more comfortable. And it allows for students to be like in the teacher and the student perspective, because I know like when students are sitting in the classroom, they never think about like how the teacher is feeling or like what the teacher has to go through like to make the lessons, to make them engaging. So I feel like being an LTA allows for the student to be in the teacher's shoes, so when they go sit in another class, they know how that teacher feels. And I also said that for students who want to go into in the education field, I feel like this is an amazing opportunity for them to get earlier experience in the classroom with doing lessons and interacting with students, so they wouldn't have to wait like to being in college and you're just starting in college. So I feel like if they can start in high school, that'll be like an early experience for them. So yeah.
I don't know that that there's anything that I could add to that. Thank you so much, Michaela. And thanks to everyone for joining. As Sarah mentioned at the beginning, I know after a day full of Zoom, it can be a lot to hop on another Zoom. So I really appreciate everyone for joining and for sharing your ideas. So
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Michaela, Molly, Marins, everyone who participated. This was truly one of my favorites. This is incredibly inspiring work. It's just amazing, you know, being a mom myself, hearing how, you know, strongly some schools and educators are really driving student voice and student leadership opportunities. It's incredible. And it's what we need to be doing. So I think it's wonderful. So Katie and Michaela specifically, thank you both so much for sharing everything today. It was just wonderful. And absolutely. Molly, thank you for creating this program. That I didn't even know that until Katie mentioned it. So it's incredible to have you here too. And I don't have much else to say except for thank you. And we'll send a follow-up email by the end of the week that includes a link to the slide deck and resources. And then also we have just a really quick final follow-up survey that we give to all of our attendees, just so you can help us better craft the rest of this series, however long it may be. So always feel free to reach out to us at CFE. We're here for you. We're here for specifically Chicago Public School educators and their students. And all of our work is driven by the needs and ideas and autonomous thinking of educators. And, you know, we really work to ensure that we can continue to support educators, you know, creativity and design, and that's what we always aim to do. So anyway, I'll leave it there. I hope you all have wonderful evenings, and will join us again. Hopefully we'll have many more of these chats. And that's it for me. So thanks so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. Katie and Michaela especially, but all of you, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Hi,
Thank you for
everyone.
having me.
Oh, thank you,
Bye.
Michaela.